Sex and disability is still a taboo subject, but I think it's time to say that a disability should not mean a life void of intimacy. It's totally possible to have sex with a disability. A person with a disability must embrace the ability to adapt, and that is the key when it comes to sex and disability. According to World Health Organization, sexuality is an integral part of the personality of everyone, man, woman, and child. It is a basic need and aspect of being human that cannot be separated from other aspects of life. Sex and disability tend to be unmentionable, and as a result, more people with disabilities do not have satisfying sexual experiences and expression. Sex and disability tends to be a taboo area for many able-bodied persons and is rarely discussed in the same senses, reports DisabledWorld.com. As a result, more than 50% of disabled people do not have any form of a regular sexual life. People with physical or intellectual disabilities in today's society are often regarded as non-sexual adults. Sex is very much associated with youth and physical attractiveness, and when it is not, it is often seen as unseemly. If sex and disability are discussed, it is very much in terms of capacity, technique, and fertility. In particular, male capacity and technique in female fertility, with no reference to sexual feelings by ignoring aspects of sexuality such as touching, affection, and emotion. In addition, opportunities for sexual exploration among disabled people, particularly the young, are very limited. There is often a lack of privacy, and they are much more likely than other young people to receive a negative reaction from an adult if discovered. The general reduction in life choices also has an impact on self-esteem, which in turn affects sexuality. A person with a disability of some kind may tend to feel unattractive or even less worthy of sexual partnership or relations because they think they can't live up to the idealized image today's society has set. If the disability happened later on in life, the person may recall how they used to look and feel very unattractive by comparison to whom they once were. There are many stereotypes that are pervasive when it comes to disabilities. Opening the door to these challenging topics, I hope will one day lead us to a more inclusive and accepting society. It is my hope that events like the Sex and Disability Workshop, which will take place this Thursday, March 1st from 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. at the Memphis Center for Independent Living, will equip our community with useful information that will aid everyone in making the best decisions possible, because for many of us, nobody has had a conversation about sex. Honestly, I was told you must wait until you get married. I firmly believe knowledge is empowering. Today we're here to talk about a topic that you don't hear very much about, and that is sex and disability. For a long time, it's been believed that people with disabilities are asexual, not sexually active, don't have any feeling or emotion, and can't have intimate relationships. As a person with a disability, I'm here to tell you it's absolutely a myth. And we, as people with disabilities, we're very sexual. So a couple things we want to get into today are myths and misconceptions about being a person with a disability and sex. Also, we want to cover sex abuse, and also some of what we were told growing up about sex, or what we were not told. Should be, why do you all think that there is such a belief that people with disabilities are asexual or not having sex? And then we can follow up with, what were you told about sex?
Well, my mother just did not have that discussion with either of her children. She kept an eye on us morning and night, so we really didn't have many opportunities to get into such activities. But I got my education like a lot of people sometimes do in school, and then I talked to friends and then learned about other things, shall we say. And I think the reason parents, or I think that perhaps it's people with more physical limitations that are viewed more asexually. I don't see that as, I haven't heard that for people with visual disabilities as much, so I don't have very much experience with that. So I'm wondering if it's the type of disability more that's the barrier in terms of viewing you as non-sexual.
Well, myself, growing up, my mom, she was always a hands-on person. She talked to me and my sisters about sex and babies and birth control and all that good stuff, because she didn't have any intention of rocking no baby while she was young. But one thing I have learned since I've acquired my disability is that it's a misconception about people with disabilities being able to perform sex acts. Now, as my gynecologist told me once, that can be a form of foreplay. It's all about how you perceive yourself. I mean, what do you like to do, and so forth, positions and things like that. We are still very much human beings. All it means, our disability only means that we have a new way of doing things, a different way of doing things. But we're quite capable of loving, having sex, having kids, and doing the whole 9 yards, just like, quote unquote, the so-called well people.
I think one of the biggest misconceptions people have about people with disabilities and their sexual behavior and attitude is the fact that typical people think that it's wrong. They think that it shouldn't happen. In my own family, I know my aunt, I was talking about my friends and their issues with being parents with disabilities, and she couldn't believe that 2 people with disabilities actually had a baby. It even came out of her own mouth that, well, why would they do that, and how did they do that? In terms of what my parents talked about when it comes to sex, seeing as I have 4 other sisters and brothers, they kind of talked around it. You know, they more focused their attention and their skills and abilities towards my sisters and brothers, which I find kind of ironic and funny since they didn't listen. So I would say it was trial and error for me. I allowed my sisters and brothers to go out there, and while they were doing their thing, I snuck off and did my thing. And that's just the honest truth. And my mother, to this day, she still, kind of, shies away from sex and talking about it so much, especially with me, because I'm kind of vulgar.
I would say for me, I grew up in a household where everything was all faith-based, Christian-based and stuff. And so my family was under the notion that you shouldn't be having sex until you get married. So with that being said, they just didn't talk about it either. I did find out some things from school, but not enough. So I found out more stuff thanks to AOL when we had good dial-up in the wonderful world of porn. I think... for myself, the misconception is, well, just because I'm in a wheelchair, I'm paralyzed. So automatically, folks come off with, well, aren't you paralyzed? Well, how can you do this? And how can you do that? So then I'll be like, well, no, I'm not paralyzed. And then all these questions, well, how this and how do you do that and all that. It depended on if I'm interested in the person. If I'm really interested, I'll be like, well, you can find out. And so some of them, they want to find out. And, thanks to that, I've had a couple regular friends. And as far as I'm concerned, it's all good. I think you just have to be assertive, tell people what you can do, understand that people really don't know what you can do. And I think oftentimes it's because society doesn't view people as sexual beings. And I don't think we can do a great deal about that to change, except for you just have to get out there and be yourself and do what you do and have fun. Well, I think you brought up an interesting point and one that needs to be talked about, which is abuse, because all segments of people with disabilities, you find episodes of abuse, and I think it's because of vulnerability and even more so reason why I think some conversation needs to be had so people can identify inappropriate behavior and be able to get help and speak out against it, because I also think, as Miss Bobby said, there is this myth that we are weak and all that kind of stuff. So it really is important that some dialogue happens concerning people with disabilities to hopefully curtail some of that.
And for myself, I think sexual abuse, it happens not only in institutions and things like that, but it's happening in the home. A lot of times, it can even be a relative that abuse someone with a disability. And one of the things I found that a lot of people with disabilities that are in institutions, they're not reported because of fear. They fear that if they make waves, that, you know, it's going to be retaliations. I've ran into that so many times. They would pull me to the side and said one of the orderlies or one of the CNAs have funneled them, and even to the point where, and I walked in on this one, another resident was trying to have sex with another resident, and she was screaming and hollering, and they were just standing there. I mean, other workers and they were just standing there. So sexual abuse, I think it's more difficult for a person with a disability to report, or in some cases to recognize, because of the fear and the retaliation and stuff like that that goes on.
Just to go back to what Tim and Miss Bobby were referring to about the fear and the retaliation. And I often speak about this with the young people in the group that I facilitate, the life group, the issue of physical safety when you are a person with a disability. And sometimes you may find yourself in a situation with another individual who doesn't hear you when you say no the first time. Or you are in a situation where you're the person with the physical disability or intellectual disability, it doesn't matter, and your body part may not work like the other side of your body, or you may be at a physical disadvantage. So what do you do then? How do you get yourself out of that situation? I think all of those things need to be talked about more.
I think that provider agencies that work with individuals are very reluctant, if unwilling, to talk about this subject. When we've brought it up in the past that we're doing workshops on sex and disability, even professionals who work with individuals with disabilities get that, you're talking about what? With people with disabilities? And I mean, they shy away from it themselves. So if the population that's supposed to be geared to work with individuals with disabilities to help them to rehab or to help them learn about living with their disabilities are uncomfortable and unwilling to talk about it, then people with disabilities are just out there in the wilderness wandering.
Other organizations and stuff has to be comfortable, has to become comfortable within themselves and their own sexuality to be able to open up and talk to people with disabilities, especially the young people. They have to be educated on the do's and the don'ts.
And we got to remember too that it's not just the young people; it is people who acquire it as adults too.
Yeah.
So maybe we need a Kama Sutra written by somebody with a disability. You know.
Yeah, they did create the dildo.
Well, that was a person with a disability. That's true. So yeah, yeah.
Well, as you can see, we've had quite a spirited debate about sex and disability with a matter of varying opinions. In closing, I would say this points to the reason why it is very important to have conversations about sex and disability. We would like to thank you for tuning in to this edition of Disability View, and we hope that you did enjoy our sex and disability forum, and we would love to hear about your experience. And thank you again. I'm T. Red.
I'm Bobby Fields.
I'm Christina Clift.
And I'm Allison Donald. We out. Peace.